First. God spoke to Moses, speak to the congregation of Israel. Tell them, be holy, because I, God, your God, am holy. Every one of you must respect his mother and father. Keep my Sabbaths. I am God, your God. Don't take up with no God idols. Don't make gods of cast metal. I am God, your God. When you sacrifice a peace offering to God, do it as you have been taught, so it is acceptable. Eat it on the day you sacrifice it, and the day following. Whatever is left until the third day is to be burned up. If it is eaten on the third day, it is polluted meat and not acceptable. Whoever eats it will be held responsible because he has violated what is holy to God. That person will be cut off from his people. When you harvest your land, don't harvest right up to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings from the harvest. Don't strip your vineyard bare or go back and pick up the fallen grapes. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am God, your God. Don't steal, don't lie, don't deceive anyone. Don't swear falsely using my name, violating the name of your God. I am God. Don't exploit your friend or rob him. Don't hold back the wages of a hired hand overnight. Don't curse the deaf. Don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind. Fear your God. I am God. Don't pervert justice. Don't show favoritism to either the poor or the great. Judge on the basis of what is right. Don't spread gossip and rumors. Don't just stand by when your neighbor's life is in danger. I am God. Don't secretly hate your neighbor. If you have something against him, get it out in the open. Otherwise, you're an accomplice in his guilt. Don't seek revenge or carry a grudge against any of your people. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am God. Keep my decrees. Don't mate two different kinds of animals. Don't plant your field with two kinds of seed. Don't wear clothes woven with two kinds of material. If a man has sex with a slave girl who is engaged to another man, but has not yet been ransomed or given her freedom, there must be an investigation. But they aren't to be put to death because she wasn't free. The man must bring a compensation offering to God at the entrance to the tent of meeting, a ram of compensation. The priest will perform the ritual of atonement for him before God with the ram of compensation for the sin he has committed. Then he will stand forgiven of the sin he committed. When you enter the land and plant any kind of fruit tree, don't eat the fruit for the 3 years. Excuse me. Consider it inedible. By the 4th year, its fruit is holy, an offering of praise to God. Beginning in the 5th year, you can eat its fruit. You'll have richer harvests this way. I am God, your God. Don't eat meat with blood in it. Don't practice divination or sorcery. Don't cut the hair on the sides of your head or trim your beard. Don't gash your bodies on behalf of the dead. Don't tattoo yourselves. I am God. Don't violate your daughter by making her a whore. The whole country would soon become a brothel filled with sordid sex. Keep my Sabbaths and revere my sanctuary. I am God. Don't dabble in the occult or traffic with mediums. You'll pollute your souls. I am God, your God. Show respect to the aged. Honor the presence of an elder. Fear your God. I am God. When a foreigner lives with you in your land, don't take advantage of him. Treat the foreigner with the same as a native. Love him like one of your own. Remember that you were once foreigners in Egypt. I am God, your God. Don't cheat when measuring length, weight, or quantity. Use honest scales and weights and measures. I am God, your God. I brought you out of Egypt. Keep all my decrees and all my laws. Yes, do them. I am God. Leviticus chapter 20. God spoke to Moses, tell the Israelites, each and every Israelite and foreigner in Israel who gives his child to the god Molech must be put to death. The community must kill him by stoning. I will resolutely reject that man and cut him off from his people. By giving his child to the god Molech, he has polluted my sanctuary and desecrated my name. If the people of the land look the other way as if nothing happened when that man gives his child to the god Molech, and fail to kill him, I will resolutely reject that man and his family and him and all who join him in prostituting themselves in the rituals of the god Molech. I will cut off from their people. I will resolutely reject persons who dabble in the occult or traffic with mediums, prostituting themselves in their practices. I will cut them off from their people. Set yourselves apart for a holy life. Live a holy life, because I am God, your God. Do what I tell you. Live the way I tell you. I am the God who makes you holy. Any and every person who curses his father or mother must be put to death. By cursing his father or mother, he is responsible for his own death. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, the wife, say of his neighbor, both the man and the woman, the adulterer and the adulteress, must be put to death. If a man has sex with his father's wife, he has violated his father. Both the man and woman must be put to death. They are responsible for their own deaths. If a man has sex with his daughter-in-law, both of them must be put to death. What they have done is perverse, and they are responsible for their own deaths. If a man has sex with a man, as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is abhorrent. They must be put to death. They are responsible for their own deaths. If a man marries both a woman and her mother, that's wicked. All three of them must be burned at the stake, purging the wickedness from the community. If a man has sex with an animal, he must be put to death, and you must kill the animal. If a woman has sex with an animal, you must kill both the woman and the animal. They must be put to death, and they are responsible for their deaths. If a man marries his sister, the daughter of either his father or mother, and they have sex, that's a disgrace. They must be publicly cut off from their people. He has violated his sister and will be held responsible. If a man sleeps with a woman during her period and has sex with her, he has uncovered her flow, and she has uncovered her flow of blood. Both of them must be cut off from their people. Don't have sex with your aunt or either your mother's or father on either your mother's or father's side. That violates a close relative. Both of you are held responsible. If a man has sex with his aunt, he has dishonored his uncle. They will be held responsible and die childless. If a man marries his brother's wife, it's a defilement. He has shamed his brother. They will be childless. Do what I tell you, all my decrees and laws. Live by them so that the land where I'm bringing you won't vomit you out. You simply must not live like the nations I'm driving out before you. They did all these things, and I hated every minute of it. I've told you, remember, that you will possess their land, and I'm giving to you as an inheritance a land flowing with milk and honey. I am God, your God, who has distinguished you from the nations. So live like it. Distinguish between ritually clean and unclean animals and birds. Don't pollute yourselves with any animal or bird or crawling thing which I have marked out as unclean for you. Live holy lives before me, because I, God, am holy. I've distinguished you from the nations to be my very own. A man and a woman who is a medium or sorcerer among you must be put to death. You must kill them by stoning. They're responsible for their own deaths. Leviticus 21, holy priests. God spoke to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron. Tell them, a priest must not ritually contaminate himself by touching the dead, except for close relatives, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, or an unmarried sister who is dependent on him since she has no husband. For these he may make himself ritually unclean, but he must not contaminate himself with the dead who are only related to him by marriage and thus profane himself. Priests must not shave their heads or trim their beards or gash their bodies. They must be holy to their God and must not profane the name of their God, because their job is to present the gifts of God, the food of their God. They are to be holy. Because a priest is holy to his God, he must not marry a woman who has been a harlot or a cult prostitute or a divorced woman. Make sure he is holy because he serves the food of your God. Treat him as holy because I, God, who make you holy, am holy. If a priest's daughter defiles herself in prostitution, she disgraces her father. She must be burned at the stake. The high priest, the one among his brothers who has received the anointing oil poured on his head and has been ordained to wear the priestly vestments, must not let his hair go wild and tangled, nor wear ragged and torn clothes. He must not enter a room where there is a dead body. He must not ritually contaminate himself, even for his father or mother. And he must neither abandon nor desecrate the sanctuary of his God because of the dedication of the anointing oil which is upon him. I am God. He is to marry a young virgin, not a widow, not a divorcee, not a cult prostitute. He is only to marry a virgin from his own people. He must not defile his descendants among his people, because I am God who makes him holy. God spoke to Moses, tell Aaron, none of your descendants in any generation to come who has a defect of any kind may present an offering, the food of his God. That means anyone who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed, crippled in foot or hand, hunchback or dwarf, who has anything wrong with his eyes, who has running sores or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron the priest who has any defect is to offer gifts to God. He has a defect and so must not offer the food of his God. He may eat the food of his God, both the most holy and the holy, but because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar. It would desecrate my sanctuary. I am God who makes them holy. Moses delivered this message to Aaron, his sons, and to all the people of Israel. Leviticus 22. God spoke to Moses, tell Aaron and his sons to treat the holy offerings that the Israelites consecrate to me with reverence so they won't desecrate my holy name. I am God. Tell them from now on, if any of your descendants approaches in a state of ritual uncleanness, the offerings that the Israelites consecrate to God, he will be cut off from my presence. I am God. Each and every one of Aaron's descendants who has an infectious skin disease or discharge may not eat of any of the holy offerings until he is clean. Also, if he touches anything defiled by a corpse or has an emission of semen or is contaminated by touching a crawling creature or touches a person who is contaminated for whatever reason, a person who touches any such thing will be ritually unclean until evening and may not eat of any holy offerings unless he is washed well with water. After the sun goes down, he is clean and may go ahead and eat the holy offerings. They are his food. But he must not contaminate himself by eating anything found dead or torn by wild animals. I am God. The priest must observe my instructions lest they become guilty and die by treating the offerings with irreverence. I am God who makes them holy. No lay person may eat anything set apart as holy, nor may a priest guess or his hired hand eat anything holy. But if a priest buys a slave, the slave may eat of it. Also, the slaves born in his house may eat of his food. If a priest's daughter marries a layperson, she may no longer eat from the holy contributions. But if the priest's daughter is widowed or divorced and without children and returns to her father's household, as before, she may eat of her father's food. But no layperson may eat of it. If anyone eats from a holy offering accidentally, he must give back the holy offering to the priest and add 20% to it. The priest must not treat with irreverence the holy offerings of the Israelites that they contribute to God, lest they desecrate themselves and make themselves guilty when they eat the holy offerings. I am God who makes them holy. God spoke to Moses, tell Aaron and his sons and all the people of Israel, each and every one of you, whether native born or foreigner, who presents a whole burnt offering to God to fulfill a vow or as a free will offering, must make sure that it is a male without defect from cattle, sheep, or goats, for it is to be acceptable. Don't try slipping in some creature that has a defect. It won't be accepted. Whenever anyone brings an offering from cattle or sheep as a peace offering to God to fulfill a vow or as a free will offering, it has to be perfect without defect to be acceptable. Don't try giving God an animal that is blind, crippled, mutilated, an animal with running sores, a rash, or mangy. Don't place any of these on the altar as a gift to God. You may, though, offer an ox or sheep that is deformed or stunted as a free will offering, but is not acceptable in fulfilling the vow. Don't offer to God an animal with the bruised, crushed, torn, or cut off testicles. Don't do this in your own land, but don't accept them from foreigners and present them as food for your God either. Because of deformities and defects, they will not be acceptable. God spoke to Moses, when a calf or lamb or goat is born, it is to stay with its mother for 7 days. After the 8th day, it is acceptable as an offering, a gift to God. Don't slaughter both the cow or ewe and its young on the same day. When you sacrifice a Thanksgiving offering to God, do it right so it will be acceptable. Eat it on the same day. Don't leave any leftovers until morning. I am God. Do what I tell you. Live what I tell you. I am God. Don't desecrate my holy name. I insist on being treated with holy reverence among the people of Israel. I am God who makes you holy and brought you out of Egypt to be your God. I am God. Leviticus 23, the feast. God spoke to Moses, tell the people of Israel, these are my appointed feasts, the appointed feasts of God, which are to be a decree as sacred assemblies. Work 6 days, the 7th day is a Sabbath, a day of total and complete rest, a sacred assembly. Don't do any work. Wherever you live, it is a Sabbath to God. These are the appointed feasts of God, the sacred assemblies which you are to announce at the time set for them. God's Passover beginning at sundown on the 14th day of the first month. God's feast of unraised bread on the 15th day of the same month. You are to eat unraised bread for 7 days. Hold a sacred assembly on the first day. Don't do any regular work. Offer fire gifts to God for 7 days. On the 7th day, hold a sacred assembly. Don't do any regular work. God spoke to Moses, tell the people of Israel, when you arrive at the land that I'm giving you and reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain that you harvest. He will wave the sheaf before God for acceptance on your behalf. On the morning after Sabbath, the priest will wave it. On the same day that you wave the sheaf, offer a year-old male lamb without defect for a whole burnt offering to God, and with it a grain offering of 4 quarts of fine flour mixed with oil, a fire gift to God, a pleasing fragrance, and also a drink offering of a quart of wine. Don't eat any bread or roasted or fresh grain until you have presented this offering to your God. This is a perpetual decree for all your generations to come wherever you live. Count 7 full weeks from the morning after the Sabbath when you brought a sheaf as a wave offering, 50 days until the morning of the 7th Sabbath. Then present a new grain offering to God. Bring from wherever you are living 2 loaves of bread made from 4 quarts of fine flour and baked with yeast as a wave offering of the first ripe grain to God. In addition to the bread, offer 7 yearling male lambs without defect, plus 1 bull and 2 rams. They will be a whole burnt offering to God together with their grain offerings and drink offerings, offered as fire gifts, a pleasing fragrance to God. Offer 1 male goat for an absolution offering and 2 yearling lambs for a peace offering. The priest will wave the 2 lambs before God as a wave offering, together with the bread of the first ripe grain. They are sacred offerings to God for the priests. Proclaim the day as a sacred assembly. Don't do any ordinary work. It is a perpetual decree wherever you live down through your generations. When you reap the harvest of your land, don't reap the corners of your field or gather the gleanings. Leave them for the poor and the foreigners. I am God, your God. God said to Moses, tell the people of Israel on the first day of the 7th month, set aside a day of rest, a sacred assembly. Mark it with loud blasts on the ram's horns. Don't do any ordinary work. Offer a fire gift to God. God said to Moses, the 10th day of the 7th month is the day of atonement. Hold a sacred assembly fast and offer a fire gift to God. Don't work on that day because it is a day of atonement to make atonement for you before your God. Anyone who doesn't fast on that day must be cut off from his people. I will destroy from among his people anyone who works on that day. Don't do any work that day. None. This is a perpetual decree for all generations to come. Wherever you happen to be living, it is a Sabbath of complete and total rest, a fast day. Observe your Sabbath from evening of the 9th day of the month until the following evening. God said to Moses, tell the people of Israel, God's feast of booths begins on the 15th day of the 7th month. It lasts 7 days. The first day is a sacred assembly. Don't do any ordinary work. Offer fire gifts to God for 7 days. On the 8th day, hold a sacred assembly and offer a gift to God. It is a solemn convocation. Don't do any ordinary work. These are the appointed feasts of God, which you will decree as a sacred assemblies for presenting fire gifts to God. The whole burnt offerings, grain offerings, sacrifices, and drink offerings assigned to each day. These are in addition to offerings for God's Sabbaths and also in addition to other gifts connected with whatever you have vowed and all the free will offerings you give God. So summing up, on the 15th day of the 7th month, after you brought your crops in from your fields, celebrate the feast of God for 7 days. The first day is a complete rest and the 8th day is a complete rest. On the first day, pick the best fruit from the best trees. Take fronds of palm trees and branches of leafy trees from willows by the brook and celebrate in the presence of your God for 7 days. Yes, for 7 full days, celebrate it as a festival to God. Every year from now on, celebrate it in the 7th month. Live in booths for 7 days. Every son and daughter of Israel is to move in the booths so that your descendants will know that I made the people of Israel live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am God, your God. Moses posted the calendar for the annual appointed feast of God, which Israel was to celebrate. Leviticus chapter 24, light and bread. God spoke to Moses, order the people of Israel to bring you virgin olive oil for light so that the lamps may be kept burning continually. Aaron is in charge of keeping these lamps burning in front of the curtain that screens the testimony in the tent of meeting from evening to morning continually before God. This is a perpetual decree down through the generations. Aaron is responsible for keeping the lamps burning continually on the lampstand of pure gold before God. Take fine flour and bake 12 loaves of bread using about 4 quarts of flour to a loaf. Arrange them in 2 rows of 6 each on the table of pure gold before God. Along each row, spread pure incense, making the bread as a memorial. It is a gift to God. Regularly every Sabbath, this is bread to be set before God, a perpetual covenantal response from Israel. The bread then, though, goes to Aaron and his sons, who are to eat it in a holy place. It is their most holy share from the gifts to God. This is a perpetual decree. One day, the son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father went out among the Israelites. A fight broke out in the camp between him and an Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman blasphemed the name of God and cursed. They brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomith, daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. They put him in custody, waiting for God's will to be revealed to them. Then God spoke to Moses, take the blasphemer outside the camp. Have all those who heard him place their hands on his head. Then have the entire congregation stone him. Then tell the Israelites, anyone who curses God will be held accountable. Anyone who blasphemes the name of God must be put to death. The entire congregation must stone him. It makes no difference whether he's a foreigner or a native. If he blasphemes the name, he will be put to death. Anyone who hits and kills a fellow human must be put to death. Anyone who kills someone's animal must make it good, a life for a life. Anyone who injures his neighbor will get back the same as he gave. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. What he did to hurt that person will be done to him. Anyone who hits and kills an animal must make it good. But whoever hits and kills a fellow human will be put to death. And no double standards. The same rule goes for foreigners and natives. I am God, your God. Moses then spoke to the people of Israel. They brought the blasphemer outside the camp and stoned him. The people of Israel followed the orders God had given Moses. Wow. Leviticus 25, the land will observe a Sabbath to God. God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. Speak to the people of Israel. Tell them, when you enter the land which I am going to give you, the land will observe a Sabbath to God. Sow your fields, prune your vineyards, and take in your harvest for 6 years. But the 7th year, the land will take a Sabbath of complete and total rest, a Sabbath to God. You will not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Don't reap what grows of itself. Don't harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land gets a year of complete and total rest, but you can eat from what the land volunteers during the Sabbath year. You and your men and women servants, your hired hands, and the foreigners who live in the country. And of course, all your livestock and the wild animals in the land can eat from it. Whatever the land volunteers itself can be eaten. The 50th year is your year of Jubilee. Count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years. 7 Sabbaths of years adds up to 49 years. Then sound loud blasts on the ram's horn on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. Sound the ram's horn all over the land. Sanctify the 50th year. Make it a holy year. Proclaim freedom all over the land to everyone who lives in it. A jubilee for you. Each person will go back to his family's property and reunite with his extended family. The 50th year is your jubilee year. Don't sow, don't reap what volunteers itself in the fields. Don't harvest the untended vines because it's a jubilee, a holy year for you. You're permitted to eat from whatever volunteers itself in the fields. In this year of Jubilee, everyone returns home to his family property. If you sell or buy property from one of your countrymen, don't cheat him. Calculate the purchase price on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee. He is obliged to set the sale price on the basis of the number of harvests remaining until the next Jubilee. The more years left, the more money. You can raise the price. But fewer years left, less money, decrease the price. What you're buying and selling, in fact, is the number of crops you're going to harvest. Don't cheat each other. Fear your God. I am God, your God. Keep my decrees and observe my laws, and you will live secure in the land. The land will yield its fruit. You will have all you can eat and will live safe and secure. Do I hear you ask, what are you going to eat in the 7th year if we don't plant or harvest? I assure you, I will send such blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. While you plant in the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and continue until the harvest of the 9th year comes. The land cannot be sold permanently because the land is mine and you are foreigners. You are my tenants. You must provide for the right of redemption for any of the land that you own. If one of your brothers becomes poor and has to sell any of his land, his nearest relative is to come and buy back what his brother sold. If a man has no one to redeem it, but he later prospers and earns enough for its redemption, he is to calculate the value since he sold it and refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it. He can then go back to his own land. If he doesn't get together enough money to repay him, what he sold remains in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. In the Jubilee, it will be returned and he can go back and live on his land. If a man sells a house in a walled city, he retains the right to buy it back for a full year after the sale. At any time during that year, he can redeem it. But if it's not redeemed before the full year is passed, it becomes the permanent possession of the buyer and his descendants. It is not returned in the Jubilee. However, houses in unwalled villages are treated the same as fields. They can be redeemed, and have to be returned at the Jubilee. As to the Levitical cities, houses in the cities owned by the Levites are always subject to redemption. Levitical property is always redeemable if it's sold in the town that they hold and reverts to them in the Jubilee, because the houses in the towns of the Levites are their property among the people of Israel. The pastures belonging to their cities may not be sold. They are permanent possession. If one of your brothers becomes indigent and cannot support himself, help him, the same as you would a foreigner or a guest, so that he can continue to live in your neighborhood. Don't gouge him with interest charges. Out of reverence for your God, help your brother to continue to live with you in the neighborhood. Don't take advantage of his plight by running up big interest charges on his loans. And don't give him food for profit. I am your God who brought you out of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. If one of your brothers becomes indigent and has to sell himself to you, don't make him work as a slave. Treat him as a hired hand or a guest among you. He will work for you until the Jubilee, after which he and his children are set free to go back to his clan and his ancestral land. Because the people of Israel are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt, they may never be sold as slaves. Don't tyrannize them. Fear your God. The male and female slaves which you have are to come from the surrounding nations. You are permitted to buy slaves from them. You may also buy the children of foreign workers who live among you temporarily, and from their clan which are living among you and have been born in your land. They become your property. You may will them to your children as property and make them slaves for life, but you must not tyrannize your brother Israelites. If a foreigner or temporary resident among you becomes rich and one of your brothers becomes poor and sells himself to the foreigner who lives among you or to a member of the foreigner's clan, he still has the right of redemption after he has sold himself. One of his relatives may buy him back. An uncle or cousin or any close relative of his extended family may redeem him. Or if he gets the money together, he can redeem himself. What happens then is that he and his owner count out the time from the year he sold himself to the year of Jubilee. The buyback price is set according to the wages of a hired hand for that number of years. If any years remain before the Jubilee, he must pay back a larger scale of his purchase price. But if only a few years remain until the Jubilee, he is to calculate his redemption price accordingly. He is to be treated as a man hired from year to year. You must make sure that his owner does not tyrannize him. If he has not redeemed any of these ways, he goes free in the year of Jubilee. He and his children, because the people of Israel are my servants who I brought out of Egypt. I am God, your God. Leviticus 26. Don't make idols for yourselves. Don't set up an image or a sacred pillar for yourselves, and don't place a carved stone in your land that you can bow down to and worship. I am God, your God. Keep my Sabbaths, treat my sanctuary with reverence. I am God. If you live by my decrees. If you live by my decrees and obediently keep my commandments, I will send the rains in their seasons. The ground will yield its crops, and the trees of the field their fruit. You will thresh until the grape harvest, and the grape harvest will continue until planting time. You will have more than enough to eat, and you will live safe and secure in your land. I'll make the country a place of peace. You'll be able to go to sleep at night without fear. I'll get rid of the wild beasts. I'll eliminate war. You'll chase out your enemies and defeat them. 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will chase 10,000 and do away with them. I'll give you my full attention. I'll make sure you prosper. Make sure you grow in numbers and keep my covenant with you in good working order. You'll still be eating from last year's harvest when you have to clean out the barns to make room for the new crops. I'll set up my residence in your neighborhood. I won't avoid or shun you. I'll stroll through your streets. I'll be your God. You'll be my people. I am God, your personal God, who rescued you from Egypt so that you would no longer be slaves to the Egyptians. I ripped off the harness of your slavery so that you can move about freely. But if you refuse to obey me and won't observe my commandments, despising my decrees and holding my laws in contempt by your disobedience, making shambles of my covenant, I'll step in and pour on the trouble, debilitating disease, high fevers, blindness, your life leaking out bit by bit. You'll plant seed, but your enemies will eat the crops. I'll turn my back on you and stand by while your enemies defeat you. People who hate you will govern you. You run scared even when there's no one chasing you. And if none of this works in getting your attention, I'll discipline you 7 times over for your sins. I'll break your strong pride. I'll make the skies above you like a sheet of tin and the ground under you like cast iron. No matter how hard you work, nothing will come of it. No crops out of the ground, no fruit of the trees. If you defy me and refuse to listen, your punishment will be 7 times more than your sins. I will set wild animals on you. They'll rob you of your children, kill your cattle, and decimate your numbers until you'll think you're living in a ghost town. And even if this doesn't work and you refuse my discipline and continue your defiance, then it will be my turn to defy you. Yes, I will punish you for your sins 7 times over. I'll let war loose on you, avenging your breaking of the covenant when you huddle in your cities for protection. I'll send a deadly epidemic on you and you'll be helpless before your enemies. When I cut off your bread supply, 10 women will bake bread in one oven and ration it out. You'll eat, but barely. No one will get enough. And if even this doesn't work, you still won't listen, still defy me. I've had enough, and in hot anger will defy you, punishing you for your sins 7 times over. Famine will be so severe that you end up cooking and eating your sons in stews and your daughters in barbecues. I'll smash your sex and religion shrines and all the paraphernalia that goes with them, and then stack your corpses and idol corpses in the same piles. I'll abhor you. I'll turn your cities into rubble. I'll clean out your sanctuaries. I'll hold my nose at the pleasing aroma of your sacrifices. I'll turn your land into a lifeless moonscape. Your enemies will come in and take over, and we'll be shocked at what they see. I'll scatter you all over the world and keep after you with the point of my sword in your backs. There will be nothing left in your land, nothing going on in your cities. With you gone and dispersed in the countries of your enemies, the land empty of you will finally get a break and enjoy its Sabbath years. All the time it's left there empty, the land will get rest. The Sabbaths it never got when you lived there. As for those among you still alive, I'll give them over to fearful timidity. Even the rustle of a leaf will throw them into a panic. They'll run here and there back and forth as if running for their lives, even though no one is after them, tripping and falling over one another in total confusion. You won't stand a chance against an enemy. You'll perish among the nations. The land of your enemies will eat you up. Any who are left will slowly rot away in the enemy's land, rot, and all because of their sins compounded by their ancestors' sins. On the other hand, if they confess their sins and the sins of their ancestors, their treacherous betrayal, the defiance that set off my defiance, that set them into their enemy lands, if by some chance they soften their hard hearts and make amends for their sin, I'll remember my covenant with Jacob. I'll remember my covenant with Isaac. And yes, I'll remember my covenant with Abraham, and I'll remember the land. The land will be empty of them and enjoy its Sabbaths while they're gone. They'll pay for their sins because they refused my laws and treated my decrees with contempt. But in spite of their behavior, while they are among their enemies, I won't reject or abhor or destroy them completely. I won't break my covenant with them. I am God, their God. For their sake, I will remember the covenant with their ancestors, whom I, with all the nations watching, brought out of Egypt in order to be their God. I am God. These are the decrees, laws, and instructions that God established between himself and the people of Israel through Moses at Mount Sinai. Leviticus 27, vows, dedications, and redemptions. God spoke to Moses. He said, speak to the people of Israel. Tell them, if anyone wants to vow the value of a person to the service to God, set the value of a man between the ages of 20 and 60 at 50 shekels of silver, according to the sanctuary shekel. For a woman, the valuation is 30 shekels. If the person is between the ages of 5 and 20, set the value at 20 shekels. For a male, and 10 shekels for a female. If the person is between 1 month and 5 years, set the value at 5 shekels of silver for a boy and 3 shekels of silver for a girl. If the person is over 60, set the value at 50 shekels for a man and 10 shekels for a woman. If anyone is too poor to pay the stated amount, he is to present the person to the priest, who will then set the value for him according to what the person making the vow can afford. If he vowed an animal that is acceptable as an offering to God, the animal is given to God and becomes the property of the sanctuary. He must not exchange or substitute a good one for a bad one, or a bad one for a good one. If he should dishonestly substitute one animal for another, both the original and substitute become property of the sanctuary. If what he vowed is a ritually unclean animal, one that is not acceptable as an offering to God, the animal must be shown to the priest, who will set its value either high or low. Whatever the priest sets will be its value. If the owner changes his mind and wants to redeem it, he must add 20% to its value. If a man dedicates his house to God into the possession of the sanctuary, the priest assesses its value, setting it either high or low. Whatever value the priest sets, that's what it is. If the man wants to buy it back, he must add 20% to its price, and then it's his again. If a man dedicates to God part of his family land, its value is to be set according to the amount of the seed that is needed for it, at the rate of 50 shekels for 60 of silver to 6 bushels of barley seed. If he dedicates his field during the year of Jubilee, the set value stays. But if he dedicates it after the Jubilee, the priest will compute the value according to the years left until the next Jubilee, reducing the value proportionately. If the one dedicating it wants to buy it back, he must add 20% to its valuation, and then it's his again. But if he doesn't redeem it or sells the field to someone else, it can never be bought back. When the field is released in the Jubilee, it becomes holy to God. The possession of the sanctuary, God's field, it goes into the hands of the priest. If a man dedicates to God a field he has bought, a field which is not part of the family land, the priest will compute its proportionate value in relation to the next year of Jubilee. The man must pay its value on the spot as something that is now holy to God, belonging to the sanctuary. In the year of Jubilee, it goes back to its original owner, the man from whom he bought it. The valuations will be reckoned by the sanctuary shekel at 20 gerahs to the shekel. No one is allowed to dedicate the firstborn of an animal. The firstborn as firstborn already belongs to God. No matter if it's cattle or sheep, it already belongs to God. If it's one of the ritually unclean animals, he can buy it back at its assessed value by adding 20% to it. If he doesn't redeem it, it is sold at its assessed value. But nothing that a man irrevocably devotes to God from what belongs to him, whether human or animal or family land, may be either sold or bought back. Everything devoted is holy to the highest degree. It's God's inalienable property. No human who has been devoted to destruction can be redeemed. He must be put to death. A tenth of the land's produce, whether grain from the ground or fruit from the trees, is God's. It is holy to God. If a man buys back any of the tenth he has given, he must add 20% to it. A tenth of the entire herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod, is holy to God. He is not permitted to pick out the good from the lamb or make a substitution. If he dishonestly makes substitution, both animals, the original and the substitute, becomes the possession of the sanctuary and cannot be redeemed. These are the commandments that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai, for the people of Israel. And I say, thank God for Jesus that we are not under that anymore, but we're under Jesus Christ. This is the word of the Lord, but thank God for Jesus and the new covenant. I thank God